Well, Hotel family, Hotel peace and blessings. I greet in the name of God and the ancestors, in whose footsteps I most humbly walk. His brother Ed Emoja for the Pitoy International Film Festival. As you know, the film festival side is over, but we do conversations. And today, today I have a special guest on with me. I want to thank Liz Lawless for making the connection for me again. And well, family, okay, we have someone. Okay, we call her Sister Fran. Okay, that's what Sister Fran.
Yeah.
And sister, as I'm reading about you, Sister Fran, say Sister Fran is a Presbyterian Church USA minister, spiritual director, and retreat leader, and founder of Faith and Grief Ministries, a nonprofit that provides bereavement resources. She received her Master's of Divinity in 1993 and her Doctorate of Ministry in 2007 from Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary in Austin, Texas. She enjoys playing baseball in the backyard with her 5 grandchildren. Now, she does duplicate bridge. I got to ask her about that. I have no. And she and reading. I like reading, but she likes reading. 3 times is there. So we're going to ask her. Well, Sister Fran, welcome to Conversations, PIFF Conversations. I welcome you. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's been fun. It's been nice to back and forth and.
Yes, we won't tell them about that.
Okay, yeah, right. I got to get in the right time zone.
It's all good. Now, what part of Texas are you in?
I'm in Dallas, Texas.
Oh, you're in Dallas. Okay, I've been there a few times. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me ask you a question. I have an important question for you here. What is duplicate bridge?
So duplicate bridge, if you know how to play a foursome of bridge, but there's a competitive streak in you, then you play duplicate bridge where people play, it's tables of bridge and people play the same hand. And then you are graded or scored on how well you did compared to everybody else.
Oh, that's interesting.
So it can't be, like a lot of times bridge players will go, well, I just didn't get any cards today. Well, in duplicate bridge, everybody gets the same cards and you see how well you play against the field.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. I never heard of it before until I was reading. I was like, duplicate bridge. That's duplicate bridge. Okay.
It's a great game. Just great.
Okay. So now why do you have reading 3 times?
Well,
I see all the books behind you.
Yeah, when my husband was sick, I would go to bed. He would go to bed really early and wanted me by him. And so to entertain myself, my Kindle is packed with books. And I was in 3 or 4 book clubs at the same time and with different groups of friends. And so it's just, I'm delighted that I always gave thanks that I enjoyed reading because then you're never really alone or anything.
That's true. Okay, cool. Well, I saw that when you sent me the family. She sent me like 2-paragraph bio. Now she's a minister. She's all this. So her bio is probably like 6-7 pages long, but she sent me only 2 paragraphs. That's cool. That's okay. I can go with that because I have some. Now I was reading the book. I love the book, and to me, it's a memoir. But it's a memoir of a loving story, so about a relationship that was like really cool. Like the kids in the street said, it was real. It was a real thing.
It was genuine. Yeah.
So let me ask you, why did you call it "No Winter Lasts Forever"?
Well, for years when I was an associate pastor, I taught bereavement classes, and I was writing curriculum and I would include quotes. And I found this quote by a gentleman it was an environmentalist. And it was a quote that stuck with me. I didn't even need to have a piece of paper or pencil.
Wow.
So Hal Borland is the author of that quote. No winter lasts forever. No spring skips its turn. And it's just so full of hope. I think, in this time of COVID, in this time of racial tensions, in this time of elections, You know, no winter lasts forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
No spring will skip its turn.
I like that. I like the last part. No
Yeah.
spring.
So originally, I was going to title my book "No Spring Skips Its Turn," and then just the summer before it was released that fall, I was like, "Wait a minute! I'm going to use the first part of the quote for my first book and use the second part of the quote for the second book." How's that? So I immediately contacted Liz Lawless and said, "Okay, I've changed the title. You've got to get busy on the cover." And things. And isn't it a beautiful cover?
Yeah, so I like the cover. It's very. It has a lot going on there in a very simple way. And being a photographer, I always look this. Being a photographer, I'm always looking at images and saying, trying to figure out why that person used that image for based on the lighting, the angles, what's the background, what we photographers do to make a picture pop. And like this picture is like, so cool. This bird, this looks so at peace.
Right, and that's a robin. So in our yard, we have a lot of robins, and for years, Robin would lay her eggs in the top of our ceiling fan on our porch. And Bob and I were fascinated. And so I took great care. I pulled a table over and I put pillows in a quilt when it was time for the little robins to get kicked out of the nest because I didn't want them to hurt themselves.
Uh-huh.
And so, a lot of people will look at a cardinal and that'll make them remember someone they love, or a butterfly. There's usually something within nature that connects. Yeah. And robins connect with me because they were so much a part of our life together.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, it's a nice, I was looking at the cover. I mean, the title and then the image, I was looking at the image. I was like, now, why did she pick that image? Just, it's so tranquil, and it looks so cool. I like it. It's really nice. I really like it.
And I think it kind of gives a hint that no winter is going to last forever because there's a robin.
And there's a robin in the
Yeah.
Yeah. And for those who are listening, we're talking to Sister Fran. The book is called No Winter Lasts Forever. It's a memoir of Love and Bob and Losing Alzheimer's. And if you haven't read this book, you need to read the book. It's a love letter from her to the world about the love she had for her husband. Who, if you ever been around people with Alzheimer's, this is so painful because you see someone you knew who knew so much and was so full of life, and slowly you see that's been taken away from them. And it just makes, I'm just thinking about some people I know who has made the transition because of Alzheimer's. And I knew I couldn't be around them after a while because it just hurt me so much to see the person I used to know not being that person anymore. So when I was reading this book, I was thinking of a very good friend of mine who passed from Alzheimer's. I was like, and it's just very, very painful to think of, to see what the disease does to someone you love. If you're married to the person, oh my goodness. And I'm reading this book, and as I'm Sister Fran, as I'm reading, is how you and Bob met, and then you go, and like it's just like this big build up, and seeing the challenges you'll have, you going through your test, your oral exam that you failed.
Yes.
And so let's talk about this book. So, why did you feel you had to write this book?
Bob had encouraged me over the years to write a book of my sermons and prayers that I lifted up in weekly worship services, and people had commented on them. And I thought, my mom had said that ministers will fly across the country to preach, but they won't walk across the street to hear a sermon.
Oh, that's interesting.
So, they're pretty egotistical beasts, but I thought, that's not a book. And so actually I was teaching a Sunday school class, and Liz Lawless was in the room, and I was talking about my experience of failing my oral examination for ordination,
Uh-huh.
and I had a packet of stuff, and I threw it on the floor, and I said, I could write a book about that. And she came up later to me and she said, I can help you write a book. And I would rather write a book about Bob. I want, he's so much, was a beloved professor, a very ethical, steadfast, faithful leader of a seminary, and a kind dad, and just a terrific husband. So I wanted to write about him.
Well, that's some very good reasons to write a book about somebody.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, reading through the book and seeing how you all met and the travels and you with the challenges you had, right? When he was diagnosed and his request not to tell his children and stuff like that. I want to just jump into that part. We'll come back, but how did that make you feel as the wife or mom and stuff like that? How did that make you feel to keep that secret from the kids? Because that was his request, and you, as a loving wife, respected his request until you needed help. How did that make you feel?
It made me feel very isolated and alone. I learned through pastoral ministry, you hold people's confidences. And so I had a measure of that capacity to do so. I've also discovered that Dallas is one of the largest cities that I've ever lived in, and it's one of the smallest towns. I knew that I wasn't going to be able to tell any of my friends who could be supportive, because then they would maybe tell somebody who knew somebody, and the connections are just so there. They're invisible, but they're very present. Right. And so I quickly got a professional counselor, Mary Rixford, and I dedicated the book to her. She is a top-notch therapist who's now retired. She had natural gifts, I believe, but she also had the physical condition of being blind. And I feel like that enhanced her ability to listen. If I would even move in my chair, she said, "Whoa, what's going on?" And so she was a godsend for me. So it was very hard. And I guess I kept hoping that maybe one of his kids would say, "I'm kind of noticing that Bob's acting weird," but they never did. They adored him. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. Because as I was reading the book, I said, man, she had to keep that to herself. And on top of that, you had to watch him slowly decline in things that he couldn't do as he used to do. So in fact, he talks about, in the book you wrote, like the first time he thought about when he had to write a speech, and right. He's concerned about his memory, and you were concerned about him not remembering everything in the speech he had to give. And so as I was reading that, I'm like, wow, that was a mighty challenge. I'm not even going to call it a burden. I'm going to call it a challenge for you, because you had your husband you love on this side that you adored and you respected and you want to support him, but then you had your children you love on this side. You're like, ugh! And then you have your friends, like you're talking, because it's such a big city but small town, you knew if you said anything to someone, most likely it will get back to them somewhere in some circle. So I mean, that was like a challenge on you to honor and respect that. And I said, that was really cool of her, man. She did a great job. You give her an A+ on that report card.
I fudged a little. So since we had a blended family, I have 2 adult daughters, and I did share with Omi, that's short for Naomi, and Sarah, and they just joined me in idolizing Bob. And so they were very good about making more trips home, understanding the situation, calling to see how I was, and things like that. So I appreciated that so much.
Yeah, let's take a few steps back into when you met Bob? What about him attracted you to him? What about him made your eyes go woody, 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 and stuff?
Well, I think it was his eyes that went.
Yeah, reading the book, I'm like,
He just had these beautiful blue eyes. He was so funny and so smart, quick-witted. We enjoyed bantering back and forth with quick humor. And I just had a conversation with one of his former students just yesterday. And he said, what I loved about Bob, he said, so many professors would just take on that professorial role and you didn't see them. Mm-hmm. And he said, Bob would always show you his heart. Mm. And he said, I learned so much from him because he had been a pastor, so he knew what that life was like and what you could do and things. And so I thought that was a really sweet way. So I guess he just showed me his heart, and I was like, oh my.
He just won you over, huh?
Yes,
I just said about, as I'm listening to you speaking and reading the book, and it's kind of funny, you talk about his blue eyes, and he never thought too much about his blue eyes until he had the cataract removed, and you said he came back in the car. Talk about that, because you put it in the book, I'm like,
oh, I know. I mean, the way that Alzheimer's is so subtle and demonic, actually, in a way. So he had cataract surgery, and so I waited, and then the nurse told me it was time to pick him up, and I drove around the building, and he got in the car, and he just smiled, and he said, you know what that nurse told me? And I said, no, what? He said, she said I had the most beautiful blue eyes. And I was like, oh my God. He's forgotten that he has blue eyes. I mean, and he did lower the mirror in the car and looked, and I was just stunned. I was stunned.
Yeah. And that's why when I was reading that part, when you wrote it out so well, and talking about your expression, and then you were surprised. You gave him all this attention when he said about that, just to see what was coming next, and he talks about the blue eyes, in the book you say like you was shocked for a second before you respond. You had to think about how to respond to it,
right?
And I was like, wow, there's that moment in the reading of the book when you said that, it just gives the reader the understanding of how much love you had for him, and you were concerned about the words that you used at that time, and that was very powerful.
Yeah, I guess throughout the experience, I was very grateful for all the years that I served as a pastor in pastoral care and as a spiritual director, and listening to people and thinking about how you'll respond before you just shoot off at the mouth. Mm-hmm. And I wanted, the love I had for him just contained so much respect for him too. Probably any other time I would have said, what the hell are you talking about? Of course you have blue eyes.
and see, that's what got to me, because when I was reading the book, it's just like things that you would have taken for granted before, you were conscious enough not to do that anymore, not to do it, because all of a sudden you realize that these little things was like, they were treasure chests. They were special. They were something for you to cherish. And I was like, wow, she put that in the book. That's really cool. Even like, as I was reading through the book again, there's a part in the book where you talk about the time he got lost in the mall. Yeah. And I was in your head when I was reading that. And I was like, because, even though I never had someone with Alzheimer's, but I've been around children, and I've been in stores when children got lost in stores, and I see the parents, the fear in their face. And now it's like you have this adult who has this ailment, and he's lost. And and you go into 911 code. But you know, it worked. But you know, and the thing is, he was so cool. And just like some kids, some children, he was very cool. You know, and he comes back up with the security guard, no, la di da di da. And hey, you are like, ah! And he's like, and I could picture it by reading it, like how it was. So talk about that. How, when you saw him and you saw him coming back and he was okay, and what was wrong with him, what did that tell you at that time about this Alzheimer's of him?
You know, that part of that Alzheimer's with him is that there's just that neurological disconnect. He would never have wandered off. I heard once that individuals with Alzheimer's, their primary emotion is fear. And so I could just imagine, you know, Bob's fear, and then, you know, to see him come back and kind of, the security guard was great because they were just laughing. And he said, the security guard said, "Oh, Fran's going to be upset with me." Like, yes. But so I just tried, I mean, just the gratitude that just washes over you and the relief. And then, you know, I wanted to kind of get in his world and try to act as we drove home that, well, that was just no big deal. I mean,
and inside of you, you were like, "Arr!"
Yeah. And so I think that individuals who care for loved ones with Alzheimer's, there is this weight of combating emotions within you almost all the time. The responsibility that you carry, all of that is just really heavy.
No, I like I said, this reading the book and trying to live inside your head while you were writing it, because it's like Alzheimer's takes you to a place that you really don't want to go to, in that the person is still there and you see them dwindling away slowly, and things that you took for granted, something you just enjoyed doing. No, now you had to think about it, you had to work really hard to focus on those things, because you were talking about, you know, as his Alzheimer's got progressively worse, you know, he used to walk the laps. And all of a sudden now you have to, oh, well, we can't walk 4 laps anymore. Now we have to walk 3. Then we have to walk 2. Then we have to walk 1. Then we can't walk the laps anymore. So now, you know, in your mind, I'm thinking, what is this woman thinking as she's going through this with this person she loved? All of a sudden, the physical things that they used to do, this walking, now is a challenge, and now you have to come back. Talk a little bit about it for those who are, for people who are watching this, who might have someone Alzheimer's at the beginning stages, how it affected you, because you know you went. Talk a little bit about that. What did you do? How did you prepare yourself? What did you do in the process of all these things?
For those of you who are caring for someone and it's the early stage, maybe it's just been diagnosed, please treasure and enjoy every waking and sleeping moment that you have with that individual. Just try to absorb all of that so that can then serve as your energy and as your motivation to carry on as your world becomes smaller and smaller, because that's what it is. I mean, you know, you can be in society, you can go to eat, you can walk 4 laps, and then suddenly you can't, you're at home, people are afraid to come visit you. You know, I think that it's kind of like, I'll put it like this. I'm always glad that children are born as infants, and then over the years they become 13. Because if just this teenager walks in, you'd go, what in the world? But you gradually grow into that. And so I think it's the same way, but just in the reverse order. You know, I used to say, I mean, Bob was the sweetest little 3-year-old. I mean, you know, he'd raise his hands and I could put his shirt on and I would comb his hair and kiss his face and help him to the table and things. And so it just goes back the other way. But we're glad that things are gradual.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. So let me. After reading the book, I understand what you're saying. For those who are listening to this conference or watching this conference, I checked the book out. This is a very good book. It's written from a perspective. I mean, a lot of books are written like this, but for some reason, this book really touches my heart in that, you put so much of your personal life experience out there. And it's like for people who are going through this with someone with Alzheimer's at the beginning stages, reading this book is like a roadmap for them. Because after they read their book, your book, I think they'll be better prepared for what's coming with Alzheimer's. Because when you broke that down about the lapse, and you broke it down about, he used to like to play with the grandkids, he can't do that no more. He used to be able to do this, he can't do that anymore. And like, what can we do now? And so like, reading that from you who went through it, I think it's going to help a lot of people realize I'm not the only one this is not unique only to me. This is, something that people with this disease go through. And that's why, when I was reading, I said, this is a really nice book. It's a really nice book. It's like a workbook for people. They can go through this book and highlight stuff and refer back to it just to give them a better understanding of Alzheimer's. Because when was he diagnosed with Alzheimer's? When were you guys in a relationship when he was diagnosed?
Well, we got married in 94, and he was diagnosed in 2012. So we'd been married a good while. And so that was hard. I do thank you for encouraging people, because I did have one woman whose mom had Alzheimer's, and she highlighted the line in my book when I decided to place Bob on hospice, and I let my children, all the children know, everybody was sending an email at the same time. And I said, I've decided to put Bob on hospice, not because the end is near, but because it's unknown and I need help.
I remember that. That was a powerful segment of the book. Yeah.
Right. And, Bob's doctor did not really think Bob needed to be on hospice because, he could shuffle in the office, he was eating. And being a pastor, I had sat in enough hospice talks, and I'd engaged in conversation with enough hospice workers that I knew that they no longer, being on hospice is not what they call a death sentence. It doesn't have to be that death is immediate. It needs to be that you're not taking medications that are supposed to help the disease, but you are given medications to ease life and promote your quality of life. Quality of life
to that level where they,
right. So they were able to help Bob have a good night's sleep.
Mm-hmm.
They were able to help Bob where I never had to take him to the doctor again, because, I'd made that decision when we went to the doctor and we came upon a wreck, a car accident, and we were stalled in traffic for over 30 minutes. And Bob became so anxious, and he desperately needed to go to the restroom, and he didn't understand what was happening. And I just thought, never again. Mm-hmm. I'm not putting him through that, and I'm not putting
yourself through that. Yeah.
And I'm not putting myself through that.
Yeah.
Because I was afraid he was going to jump out of the car and So I do encourage people. It took me a long, long time to seek help from like home health agencies. It just took a long time. But once I made that decision, all the other decisions came easy. So I think that first decision kind of gets you over the bridge.
Yeah, reading that part of the book, when the first person who came in was strike one, second person strike two, and then the lady came in, and that was like, a godsend for you. I guess I could hear your breath exhale at that point in the book when you wrote about that stuff.
Yeah, and she loved Bob. I mean, she was so sweet. And as I tell in the book, Bob became nonverbal, and that was just an enormous sadness to me because he had a beautiful voice and just engage in conversation with him. But one afternoon I came home when she'd been there with him, and she came up and she smiled and she said, "I helped Dr. Shelton get in bed." And he looked at me and said, "Thank you."
Those little things, simple things. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, when you talk about him becoming nonverbal, I was like, that was like a dagger, because reading through the book, it seems like Bob, he was someone who was very meticulous about things. He planned things out, even though 1994, you wanted to get married. He was there. Well, 1998, I will retire by now, and you'll be doing this. He's planning 4 years down the road, and you're like, no, now.
Right.
So yeah, just to see to read the interaction between you and him verbally, and the things you guys went through, and then all of a sudden now he's nonverbal. What did that do to you?
The silence was very loud. Now, out these months from his death, I can see that it prepared me to live alone.
Wow.
Because, I don't like to say widow, but as a widow, you go through days where it's pretty quiet. And so I think, and then I also ache for the people whose loved ones just constantly repeat the same question until they, the caring person thinks they're going to go out of their ever living mind. And I didn't have that. So it also shows that each journey of Alzheimer's is unique. Yeah. There's not a thing that happens. And so that just happened to be part of our story.
Yeah.
But, I wish, if you can hear, I have tapes of his sermons, and it was a long time. It was way over a year after he died, and I was driving to Memphis to visit my younger daughter and her husband, and I thought, I'm going to just pop this in here and see what it's like. And it was wonderful. It was wonderful.
Yeah, I cannot imagine that, because I have a very good friend. In fact, she's like a stepmom to me, right? When my biological mother could not make some of my events, she would come, and she said, "Baby, I'm coming, and I'm going to sit in for your mama. I'm going to sit in for your mother." And I was like, wow. And sometimes I forgot her name. I just call her Nana. That's all I call her, Nana. And when she got diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and she's living with her daughter now, and I make sure I call her once every month. And sometimes, and her daughter knows when I'm on the phone with her, she says, every time you call, she just screams in the house when you call. And I'm so happy you call. And just like the simple little things, and she'll talk to me and she'll repeat herself several times over and over. She'll ask me the same questions, and I'll just answer her, because I'll just answer her, and I'll answer the same thing again. And I would never say, we just said that, man. I just answer like it's the first time she asked the question.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's just like so powerful, because it humbles me, because I remember her, because we used to work at the same place. I remember her standing up for me and supporting me and helping when I first started working there. And all the things that she did for me, and like events she come, she did the prayers for me at one of my events. I asked her to do the prayer. She said, I asked her to do the libation for me. She came and she did the libation for me and stuff. And she said, "Baby, I was so nervous. Did I do okay?" And so all these things now from all those years back, I remember them, and I'm talking to her, and she's talking about, and I'm happy that we work together, because some of the people she brings up her daughter doesn't know those people, but I do because we worked in the same place. So
Right.
we had this conversation. And so like when I was reading your book, I was thinking about her. I was like, wow, it has made, like I said, I call her once every month.
That's terrific.
Yeah, and I also am going to increase that because, every time I call, I could hear she asked me this the same. Now she went from like 2 times, maybe 3 times to 4 times, asking the same thing over again. And so I always call her when I make sure I block like an hour of my time when I call her because I know the conversation is going to be, it's not going to be a short conversation. And just like, let's hear her talk and she gets happy to talk about the old times when we used to work together. Yeah. So when I was reading your book, I truly felt what you were talking about with Bob, things, the simple things you always doing, like the time when he got lost, you just went to the mall and you just went to do something once. And all of a sudden, so now it just makes you think, just like children, you can't turn your back.
No.
You can't turn your back. And, even as an adult, but no, you can't turn your back on, you just don't know. And so when I was reading all those things in the book, I was like, wow, this book is a great book for people who have relatives or loved ones who are going through that for them to read. And you all need to get this book.
Thank you so much for reading it and having me on.
I got my little tags in here.
I do. I love it.
It's a great book because I was going through. I said, okay, we're gonna have this conversation. Let me read. I started reading. I was like, oh, this is a really good book. This is because I'm thinking about myself with with my nana who's Alzheimer's. She's going through it right now, and I'm like, as I'm reading, I'm like, wow, this is very powerful. This is a good work. It's not just a good read. It's a good workbook. It's a good workbook for people who are going through this because now they have a barometer. They could say, okay, I see what she went through at this time, at that time, and how your personal life got restricted by this oncoming disease and stuff like that. So I want you.
Even my own reading, because that book called Still Alice, I picked that up because it's about a woman who was a professor who had Alzheimer's. So I thought it would be good, and it caused such distressing dreams that I quit reading it for a while. And my counselor said, "That's smart. I mean, don't do that." And I paid her money to have her tell me that, but they'd had that experience when she went in the hospital and how scared she was when she saw the people in uniforms and everything. And when we drove to Memphis to welcome our youngest grandson, Stax, I felt like I was reliving that book because as we went through that hospital door, Bob had the same reaction as the woman in the book did.
Wow.
And so I was like, okay, I know what to do. I know what he's feeling. And so I do think it helps us to read and learn through other people's experiences.
Yeah. I mean, the book, I keep saying the book is is a wonderful workbook. If you had put some blank pages in there, which I know, some people could write notes to themselves, but you can still write notes in there because there's empty spaces in there at the end of the chapter. You can write some notes because it's a really good book to help people. Let me go a little bit more personal right here.
Okay.
Let's talk about letting go, because there had to be a process that you went through to let him go, because you saw the deterioration of his skill sets. And like you said, you made a conscious decision to put him in hospice, but you were there every day. You had help, support. But in your mind, there had to be a process that you had to let it go. Talk a little bit about that for people who are going through this. What did you do to ease, I hate saying this, but to ease that pain or help you that transition?
Yeah. Again, my call as a pastor, and especially one in pastoral care, where I was with families at end of life issues, and so several of my colleagues, and also doing bereavement work, I have seen and I have heard. I mean, there's a lot of worse things than death. And one of my colleagues, we used to say, you know, if we were diagnosed with such and such and such and such, what would we do? And I think in the bereavement work I do is it has helped me lean into a mystery that death is a birth into eternal life. And so, right. I mean, you know, that we live in a world where you're born and you die and you're resurrected. And that pattern of life, I mean, we see it in our gardens, we see it in, you know, lots of different things. And so I think I had been equipped over the years, and you know, it was interesting. A lot of people, I'm not exactly sure what was their motivation of asking me the question, but a lot of people would come and ask me, so since you do bereavement work, has it really helped you?
Oh.
And I was like, yes, it has. I understand and I'm knowledgeable on areas, and no, it hasn't, because it's my husband. So, you know, I think we live in a yes and world rather than an either or world.
Mm.
And so I believe that my professional call as a pastor,
Mm-hmm.
in my strong belief, I had a marvelous elementary school friend that wrestled with lung cancer, and she wasn't a smoker, and she had a special needs adult child, and she took her adult child to every doctor's office visit because she said, I want them to see why I have to live. Because I have to live so I can take care of my child.
Wow, that's powerful.
And, you know, at the end, when the doctors told Worthy that there wasn't anything to do, she sent all of us a text message, and she said, I've decided on hospice because I know where I'm going.
Wow. Mm.
That's powerful.
Yeah, it is. It is. It is. Wow. You know, you use a phrase just now, and you said it's worse. It's worse. Things that's worse than death. And when you say, I wrote it down, I'm like, things that's worse than death, because I want you to expound on that a little bit, because you know, to live the life you were living with your husband, it was like you were going through what he was going through, because not only was he forgetting those things, you couldn't do it anymore yourself, because you two were like this. And if he stopped doing it, you stopped doing it, because you know you would try, but it was like you were living, but not living for him, but you were living for both of you all now. And you had to remember all those things. And so when you said worse than death, let's talk a little bit about that, because I know there's people out there who are going to watch this, and your words are going to be comforting to them, or are going to help them probably deal with this disease, because some people don't know who to turn to.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about that. You use that. Let's expound on that a little bit.
You know, and of course, I recognize, I mean, this is a very, it's not an unusual statement. It's a personal statement. So I remember visiting with my counselor one time, and I said, you know, I think there's a lot of things worse than death. And she said, well, that's always, you know, depending on the circumstances. I would have found it enormously difficult, I believe more difficult, if I had watched Bob in lengthy, agonizing pain. He was not in pain.
Yeah, you read that. You wrote that in the book. Yeah, yeah.
Right, and I think that, you know, people that have to take that on and live through that and stand by loved ones in that pain, I think it would have been really difficult for people that, you know, perhaps a crash, a car crash, totally, you know, their loved ones continue living, and yet the relationship and the abilities are very, very different. And so I want to be cautious about saying that, but it is something in which I really, you know, and I do think that every time someone dies, whether you're reading the obituary or a loved one dies, or we hear of all the COVID deaths, 209,000 deaths, it gives you pause. And you think about your own mortality. And you think, what does that mean to me? And so, you know, I've rewritten my will, and I've tried to put all legal things into place where my kids can find it. And I've gone through drawers and thrown out stuff because I don't want them to go, what the world was mom thinking? I mean, I want to live fully in such a way that I know when I die, it's okay.
Yeah, you said, well, both my parents are deceased, and I remember when my dad passed away, made his transition first, I had to go clean his place out, and I was like, the things I found that he probably never would have been. And I was like, you know, spiritually, I said, okay, I was sent here to destroy these things, so no one else know about it. But then you realize it's not a burden, but it's a responsibility on your shoulders. And then my mom made her transition, and I had to do the same thing again. And I was like,
I know.
It's like, you know, so when we see all these things happening, and all these things, I spiritually believe, you know, God prepares us for everything we go through. We just have to accept that walk and say, you know, I've been given this this responsibility to do this. So now you have to say, do you want to do it or you don't want to do it? And so, you know, as you walk through it, you know, I always say to myself that, you know, I was given this responsibility. I was birthed, and part of my birthing part was this moment right now. This is why I'm here. And so that just gives me some kind of comfort and stuff like that. So when I was reading the book, I was like, you know, you and Bob met at the time you did. You got married at the time you did. Not the time you wanted to. Not the time he wanted to. You got a time when and everything that happened, you know, you guys walked that. You walk a journey, and it's very powerful. And so now we can relive some of that journey through this book that you wrote. This very well book. This book you wrote.
Thank you.
Thank you for writing it, because you give us almost a front row seat to seeing what Alzheimer's can do to a family, and if the family reacts correctly, it could be a peaceful journey for the person who's going through the Alzheimer's. Because your reaction when he got lost was remarkable when the security guard brought him back. Your response when they told him about his blue eyes in the car was, and this going over and over, reading these things that you did, you know, it's just like you prepared yourself in a very good way so that, you know, it wasn't a so-called burden, it was a responsibility to make sure he had a smooth transition as he was going through this. And I commend you for that. You did a great job. The book is a wonderful book.
Oh, thank you so much. Hugs and kisses.
I enjoyed it. Like I said, I know my Nana's going through it now. So I was just like, you know, reading the book, it's like, yeah, I know I know. I don't know, before I read your book, I really didn't have an idea what her daughter's going through, but reading your book gave me a pretty decent idea what her daughter is going through. So now I'll text the daughter, how you doing today? Is everything okay? You know, keep your head up, you know, hey, remember, if you want to talk. I just send a little texts like that now, because as I was reading your book, I was like, you know what? I don't know if anyone else is doing that. Maybe they are, I don't know, but I'm going to do what I can do. And that's just me, you know, being who I am. And so I want you to, how can people, we talk about the book, how can people find this book? How can people purchase this book?
they can go to Amazon, of course. Of course. They can also log into Fran Tilton Shelton on Facebook, and we can send them a book. And there's pictures of Bob. A couple of years before he died, I got a photographer to come for his birthday because I knew you could still tell that he had Alzheimer's, but he was able to, get dressed and things like that. And so I wanted pictures taken. And so, yeah, please buy a book.
So they could go to Amazon, and what do they look for? Okay, I would say I like to take excuses away from people. So let's tell them what do they look for in Amazon? What name should they put into the Amazon search box to find the book?
Go ahead and put No Winter Lasts Forever.
No winter lasts forever.
Yeah, because I think you can already just hold on to that quote. You didn't write it down. You just no winter lasts forever. That's a truth. That's a hope that you can just have in your heart.
Definitely. And I want to thank you for your time today, first, and thank you for writing this book. Like I said, it has given me another understanding to Alzheimer's, because I have someone who's special to me going through it. And she doesn't live close by. She lives like 2.5, 3 hours away from me. So thank you for writing the book. In closing, I want you to give a message to not only people who have family going through it, but just people in general. What would you like people to walk away from this book reading? What would you like them to know or feel after reading this book?
I want them to feel that, as you said, we're given different calls throughout our life, and that in my tradition, I knew that Christ was with me every moment. The other thing is, in our culture right now, people are given credit for everything they do or everything they say, accomplishments. And the bottom line is God loves each and every one of us. So I have thought that if there was some way that I could impart to Bob, or for people who are caring for loved ones, to impart to them, they are loved. They are loved. Not because they're bringing home a paycheck, not because they're tell you that you're pretty and they love you, not because they give you great kisses, not because, they do these things. They're loved simply because God has created them and God redeems them. And so if we could send, even in this world with all the COVID and the racial things, is God has created each and every one of us. We are one. And that's the message we need to impart.
Well, Sister Fran, thank you for writing such a wonderful book. Now, you said it's another book after this coming?
There is. It's going to be out the first day of spring in 2021.
Okay.
And that book is interesting because in all my grief work, people would talk about the second year is the hardest. And
the second year is the hardest? Okay.
It's the hardest. And they wanted to know why there wasn't a book out there to tell you that. And I said, who'd buy a book that tell you this is the hardest? So at the end of that book, I say, I still don't know who will buy that second book, yet I feel called to write it, to also have a handbook to let friends and family members know that truly the second year and then beyond that is the hardest, because the reality sets in, and lots of different things. Yeah. You'll have to have me back.
Oh, definitely. What?
Okay.
Well, Liz is probably taking notes. Get her back on the show.
Please, please. Yeah.
Well, definitely, you have my information. Just keep in touch. See what we could. Because, like I said, I know there's people out there who are who have been diagnosed, and this book might be a good thing for their family. There will be people who will be diagnosed after this interview, and they might remember this interview and go back and look at this interview and read the book. So thank you so much for sharing your life, some of your life with us, giving us an opportunity to read into your life and what you went through, because it has definitely helped me, to read the book. So I appreciate it. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank Liz for making it happen.
All right. Take care.
Okay. Have a nice evening. Good night. Okay. Bye.